Welcome to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. Join us every Sabbath on Zion Road Radio for a look at the life, deeds, and words of Yeshua Messiah and his followers from the Torah-centric Hebraic perspective they were originally lived and written in.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you find rest for your souls. You find rest for your souls. Oh, you find rest for your souls when you walk in his ways.
Today's program is on John chapter 12, verse 20 through verse 50. Please get out your Bible and follow along. What did Messiah mean about the grain of wheat, and how is it a picture of Messiah? What is the creative principle of life in the seed? What does the word sin really mean? What does sin have to do with genetic entropy? And what does it mean to be born of the Spirit instead of the flesh? Stay tuned throughout today's program for Eliyahu ben David's insight on these questions and more in John chapter 12, verse 20 through verse 50. And now, here's Eliyahu.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it.
Greetings, friends. We're moving forward in John chapter 12. And we have really an awesome portion of Scripture to look at. Rather than going through all of it, I want to look at some of the background, some of the things I have to share. I'm sure you know already, but they're good things to think about. Yeshua said, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains by itself alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Here, Yeshua is speaking of himself as a seed that, if he goes into the earth, can bring life to others and bear fruit. You know, I feel bad for some of those people that listen to Yeshua, because they would hear him say something like this, and they're thinking, what? They should know what he's talking about, but they don't know. What he's talking about is the creative principle of life in the seed. And I thought maybe we would just kind of focus on that and try to come to a basic understanding of the principle at work in what Yeshua is talking about here in this passage. This all begins back in Genesis with the creation. Genesis chapter 1, verse 11 and 12 is the first time we learn about this principle. Here is where Yahweh created vegetation in the earth. And when he created it bearing fruit after their kind with its seed in it. And the life then is in the seed. But it's not just generic life. It's life of that particular kind. And somehow it's in the seed. And through the seed, it's passed on. So it reproduces after its kind. So apple trees do not naturally produce pears or bananas. And this is the reason why evolution is stupid. Because this is what still happens. You can go to the store and you can buy seeds in the store. And if you buy petunia seeds and plant them in your garden, you're not going to get radishes growing instead. You know that kind of seed produces that kind of plant. That's how it's done. That's how Yahweh set it up from the beginning. The life of that particular kind is in the seed, and that causes reproduction after its kind. Now, we've come to know a little bit about how this happens. I say a little bit because we don't know nearly as much as people would have you think we know. But we have learned that the characteristics of the life of a given physical thing in the seed is written in the DNA. DNA is very embarrassing to people who believe in evolution, because DNA is in all living things. And the best way to understand it, that humans can understand it, is that it is like a computer code. I say it's like a computer code, but it's so far beyond a computer code. It's so advanced beyond a computer code that it's far beyond any computer code that any human or any computer has ever even been able to create. I learned a lot about this from a book that I read, and I'm going to mention this again, but the name of the book is Genetic Entropy, and it's written by an author by the name of Sanford, if you ever want to read it. What's interesting about this book is that the author is a scientist. In fact, he's one of the leading geneticists in the entire world. He actually invented some of the processes and tools they use in order to do genetic engineering. He started several biotech companies that do various kinds of genetic engineering with plants. And like everybody else who's a scientist, when he started out, he learned the concept of evolution. And of course, he accepted that because everybody accepted that. But when he actually became a geneticist, and he learned the intricacies of the genetic code, and saw that for himself, and saw how it worked, he worshiped the Creator. Because that's all you can do if you really see what this is. And he saw, hey, this is just what the Bible says. And he became a believer. And you know what? That imprint of the Creator is in everything he made. And anybody that doesn't see that is either blind or stupid, because it's so obvious. And the amazing thing is, I've often say this to people, if something is a lie, sometimes you can be deceived into believing it on the surface. But as you dig more deeply in it, all the cracks show up, and pretty soon you see what a lie it is. If something is really the truth, the deeper you dig, the more solid it becomes. And that's really what the truth is about DNA. Because nothing can reproduce without DNA. It has to be there for anything to reproduce. And for even the most simple single-cell organism To reproduce another cell, there has to be DNA. And that DNA will require, even for that simple cell, really millions of parts, millions of bits of information. And where's that going to come from? Do computer programs just kind of come together in a mud puddle? Obviously, there's an intelligence behind that, an amazing intelligence, far beyond anything that we can know or understand. And some of the things that Sanford found out about DNA are pretty amazing, because unlike a computer program, which basically is linear, in other words, it writes in one direction, just kind of like when you write something. You know, you start at the beginning and then the meaning unfolds word by word as you go through. Your DNA will do that, but also if you put it the other way, it also makes sense. If you overlap it and wrap it around, it also makes sense in other ways. There are like all these different levels. They're still trying to unwind all this. They said 99% of DNA was just junk DNA. They don't say that anymore. The reason they said it is it's so complex they couldn't even start to understand it, so they thought it must be junk. Now, it's known by geneticists how amazing it truly is. Well, you have DNA, we'll call it a computer code, just because our mind can understand that, but it's far beyond a computer code, written into every cell in your body. And this is true of every plant, every animal, every living thing. And in reproduction, there's a seed that is designed to be able to bring about that reproductive process using that DNA. It's absolutely such an amazing thing. And it produces something like itself. Now, I say something like itself because, for instance, in this picture, you have Mama Doggy and you have Daddy Doggy. And they each impart DNA into the reproductive process to make Baby Doggy. And the reason it's Baby Doggy and not Baby Kitty is because it produces after its own kind. And yet there are variations within that kind. So, you know, one of the parents has brown ears, one has white ears. The offspring might have a brown ear and a white ear. And so that is a change. But does that have anything to do with changing the offspring into some other kind of life? It's just a variation. And you know, a lot of times evolutionists will point to things like this and show how things through reproduction will change. And they'll say, well, this is an evidence of evolution. And of course, it's not an evidence of evolution. It's an evidence of changes within a kind. And because the combination of traits between the mother and the father can produce a lot of different possibilities. Like I'm a dad and I have a number of kids, and all my kids have some traits in common, and yet they're all different because they all have different traits as well. This is how this works, and it's an amazing thing how this works. It's incredible, really. But it preserves this kind of life. So there's a certain kind of life in the seed that it reproduces itself, and it can't make something else because that's not in there. There's no cat DNA in the dog DNA. Because with the first dog, you know what happened? The Creator put perfect dog DNA in the first dogs that he created. Absolutely perfect. And all the different variations of dogs and so forth, they've all come out of that because that was all in there. That was so complex that it, through these reproduction cycles, produce all of the different varieties of dogs. This is true of every kind of life, every kind of plant, and every kind of people. It's truly an amazing thing. Yahweh loves variety, and he created all of this variety, but he also loves order, and he did this in an orderly way. Now we're living in a time, of course, where we have a bunch of mad scientists that are going crazy, that are thinking, well, what are we going to do if we mix part of a lobster over here with a pony? Let's see what happens with that. I mean, they're just really messing with what God made, and it's potentially terribly, terribly dangerous. Well, after God made the plants and he made the animals so that they could reproduce after their own kind, he made man. And the thing that's different with man is what Yahweh said. Elohim created man in his own image. In Elohim's image, he created him, male and female. He created them. So man is very interesting because in some ways, mankind is just like the plants and the animals. We're physical creatures. And you and I, we all have DNA, just like the plants do, just like the animals do. And this is going to dictate many of our characteristics. You know, things like skin color, hair color, a propensity to be a little bit heavier than some other people, perhaps, to be taller, shorter, whatever it is. And Yahweh wanted all of this different kind of variety in people. He's not like we are. You know, we tend to narrow down, okay, this is beautiful and wonderful, and this is stupid and ugly. That's not how he sees people. He made all of this different variety because he sees the beauty and the value in all of it. And it's all written into the DNA. It was written into the DNA of the first man and woman. But it was perfect, absolutely flawless. It was all there, all the potential for everything that a person could be as a physical being. And so it's not surprising that we have a lot of the same characteristics as an animal. Animals get hungry, we get hungry. Animals get thirsty, we get thirsty. Animals have a drive to reproduce, we have a drive to reproduce. Animals, well, they have a drive for survival. We have a drive for survival. We have all of that within us. So you could say in our physical cells, imparted to us through our DNA, we have something similar to animal nature within us. And you know what? In the way that was created, none of that is sinful. Yahweh said all of it was good because it's all for a purpose. Even fear, if it's not distorted, it's not a bad thing. You know, if Adam was walking through the woods and he saw a pointy stick sticking up out of the ground, I'm sure he had a feeling saying, oh, I don't think I should step on that. You see, that's a good thing, right? So all of that is good in the way it was created, but that was not enough for human beings to live by. They're different. than everything else in this planet. They're not meant to be just animals, because Elohim created male and female in his own image. That's what's so totally different. And I can't tell you exactly how that interacts with DNA. Nobody can really tell you. All I can tell you is this has to do with the spirit of man. This has to do with things that animals don't have. You know, intelligence, a moral sense, things that empower us to be able to relate to our Creator because we're like Him. This is all spiritual. This was in the first man too. And this makes human beings very unusual creatures because, you know, we're physical, but at the same time, we're spiritual beings so that we can interact with our Creator. This is really such an amazing thing, how He made man and woman. And He said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. And the process is exactly the same as it is with the animals, as it is with the plants, in terms of the physical aspect of it. The life is in the seed. It's passed on, human life, through human reproduction. And we have the DNA that contains these characteristics. And of course, human DNA is incredibly complex, far beyond anything that science will ever be able to accomplish, ever. This is amazing what Yahweh did. He took the elements of the earth and He created a body. And that body included this incredible code within it from which all mankind would spring. It was all written into that. But He also gave Adam something beyond that that's spiritual. His own likeness, which is something you'll never put in a computer. Because it's far beyond anything a computer could ever deal with. It's the very character of our Creator. And you know, He's not physical. And it's so important to realize that the way that He made Adam and Eve perfect, with this perfect DNA code within them, meant that this perfection was the potential that they had to create an entire race of beings. Amazing. Was all there in the seed. There's nothing more powerful ever created than life in the seed. Do you think splitting the atom is a big thing? Life in the seed is something even more amazing and potentially explosive than splitting an atom. Well, sin happened. Sin happened. Now, how does that work? Yahweh commanded the man, we know the story, don't eat of this fruit. There was nothing different about the fruit. Nothing different about it. Except that God said, don't eat it. It's a command. And this was to introduce something into the world. The concept of obedience to our Creator. Now, the man and woman should have had no trouble with that because they're made in the image of the Creator, right? And why wouldn't they do what he said? He created everything and he gave them this beautiful life. Why wouldn't they do whatever he said? And he warned them, this is what's going to happen if you disobey my command. In the day you eat of that fruit, you're going to die. He knew what would happen. Now, to eat that fruit, what would happen is they would have to fall short of the image of God that was created within them. They would have to come short of that. That's what sin means, missing the mark. Sometimes we just can't hit that bullseye because sin came into the picture, and not only did it distort us spiritually, distorting the image of God within us, but you see, the part we don't understand is that the image of God within us is connected with our physical life too. And that's beyond us. We don't really understand exactly how that works. But what we found out is that if you damage the image of God within you, it in turn damages your physical life. And this is reflected in your DNA. It actually caused a breakdown in the DNA of human beings. So they had this perfect code that could have produced this world of perfect people, and instead, well, all they ended up having was this imperfect code within them. So that's all they could pass on. Once it was distorted and ruined, they couldn't fix it. They didn't even know it, of course. So what happened is missing the mark was a moral catastrophe. People look back and they look on this and they think, oh, eating a piece of fruit is such a bad thing. Yeah, that was a really bad thing. Because everything was perfect until they did it, and it was the first imperfect thing. The first imperfect act that ever happened. They were made to be perfect, not imperfect. And it messed up the works. It's like you have this perfectly running machine and you throw a monkey wrench into it, and what happens? All the gears start winding up, right? It was devastating on a spiritual level, but even on a physical level. Devastating. Our human DNA. What Mr. Sanford found, and many other people, is that human beings have mutated DNA. And all that means is that there are these places within your DNA where it's scrambled and messed up. So the code goes along and it seems to be fine, and then it gets to a place where it's scrambled and messed up. Well, what happens with that is it causes in your physical body imperfection, causes your body to break down. This is the major cause of aging, by the way, and then eventually causes you to die. It's also the cause of various diseases, lots of them, and also imperfections in human traits, all of that. It's kind of interesting, too, if you read the book Genetic Entropy, you're going to learn the truth about genetics. What genetic entropy means is this is the tendency of DNA, once mutated, to continue mutating in every new generation. Like once something is imperfect, it keeps getting more imperfect. As long as it's perfect, it stays perfect. As soon as it's mutated, it keeps getting worse. It's kind of like, well, here's an example. You run over a nail in your car. So you got a little hole in your tire. You just keep going because you want to get home, right? The air comes out. Pretty soon, the nail rips a bigger hole. Pretty soon, you're on the rim. If you just keep going, what happens? Even the rim is so messed up, and your whole car is falling apart, right? Things keep getting worse when there's a breakdown. And that is what is happening with mankind. And you know, eventually what happens at the end of that is your DNA, the DNA of our race, of the human race, will become so degraded that that is the end of the human species. And there is no cure for that. You know, what they're able to do with genetics is so kindergarten compared to the problem. You know, people who don't know anything will tell you, well, they can just go in and repair the DNA. If they could do that, none of them would die. They can't do that. They're never going to be able to do that because it's just far too complex for them to be able to do that. Yes, they might be able to help in certain diseases, things like that they can research, things that are relatively simple. We're not talking about a simple problem here. So this is really like a death sentence for our entire race, the entire race of man. And what Sanford found, and what he talks about in genetic entropy, is that everything is actually happening the opposite to the idea of evolution. Evolution is that, or states basically, that we keep evolving into a higher level of creature. What's actually happening through genetic entropy is with each new generation, we become more degraded and we break down more and more and more until finally the human race can't even reproduce anymore. This has already happened to a lot of simpler species, by the way. Perhaps you've read about this, that we're having this, sometimes they call it a mass extinction. And of course, they want to blame it on us because they blame everything on us. But it's really because a lot of these less complicated forms of life have already reached the end of what their DNA can do. And so they can't reproduce anymore. Very interestingly, you can look this up. The human race today is really in trouble. The sperm count, the average sperm count of men in this world has dropped by over 50%. Reproduction is in big trouble for human beings. Clearly, we're getting closer and closer to the end of this genetic entropy problem. Not a small thing. So it's a problem for our entire race, but it's also a problem for you and for me. And we already know we're all going to die, right? But it isn't just that, is it? There's other things about this. This law of sin within us, it affects how we behave. Paul wrote about this, and tell me if you can relate to this. He said, "For we know that the Torah is spiritual, but I am fleshly, sold under sin. For I don't know what I'm doing. For I don't practice what I desire to do, but what I hate, that is what I do." But if what I don't desire, that I do, I consent to the Torah that it is good. So now it is no more I that do what I hate, but sin which dwells in me. In other words, you say, this is what has happened to us. Through sin, we have this, what he's referring to as this law of sin in our body, which is just simply to say, imperfection, falling short of the glory of God. And what that's done to us, like he says, I'm fleshly. Well, what he means in that context is he says, I'm being more like an animal than I'm being like my Creator. You see, this is a aspect of sin. It really has distorted our spiritual self so that we fall back the same nature as animals, right? We're driven by those things, the things that we want, the things that we desire, the basic instincts. Those aren't always bad, but when it's distorted, it can really be bad. It can ruin your life. It can ruin your life. And even for someone like Paul, who wrote this, he knows the Torah is spiritual. He's studied the Torah inside out and upside down. We know what the truth is. We know the commandments. And yet, there's this other us that wants all the wrong stuff. And when that happens, we hate that. We want to be that spiritual person. And yet we got this war going on inside of us. And it's not an easy thing to deal with. It's not an easy thing at all, because we have sin dwelling within us. And you know what Paul said about her? Who can save me from this death? That's what he said. Praise be to God through Yeshua Messiah, our Lord. We can't fix this. Science is not going to fix this. Only Messiah can fix this. And that's what these verses are about. Yeshua said, the time has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Most certainly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains by itself alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. The Son of Man, a man, with a divine nature fully intact, a perfect man. He was like a seed. And for us to benefit, he needed to be glorified, moved to a higher state of being. Before he could be glorified, he had to die. He had to give up the natural body that he had in order to be changed into a glorified body. Your body, the way it is ruined. You're doing what you can to keep it going, but let's face it, it is a losing battle, right? We'll all do the best we can. Through Yeshua Messiah, Yahweh's plan is to give us a glorified body. In other words, to rebuild us in a whole new way. So he's not going to just fix what's wrong. He's going to make us a whole new kind of creature. And he's going to do it through the life of his Son, giving us his life instead of this old life. That's a trade I want to make. How about you? That's the creative principle of life in the seed. That is Yahweh's answer to our problem. It was never his problem. We created the problem. And he loved us enough to come up with the answer. A seed. And he knew that was the answer from the beginning. You know, the thing that's so neat about our Father is he doesn't change. You know, he set these principles into motion, and everything he does is according to these principles. You know, he is like so principled and amazing in how he does things. So he set this law of life in the seed into motion in the creation, and then that's how he deals with the problem when the problem arises. Isn't that amazing how he does that? When the problem came up and the deceiver deceived the first woman, and through her got to the man to cause them to sin, he told them what would happen, and he told them what the solution would be. He said to the serpent, who is the devil, I will put enmity between you, the devil, and the woman, who is later revealed to be his nation, Israel. And between your seed, that is the devil's seed. What seed does the devil have? Well, this distorted, broken, sinful seed in mankind, who can we attribute that to? Is that not the devil? Isn't that from the devil, from what the devil did in the garden? Through his lies, through his deception? Isn't that how the perfect seed of man was corrupted into something distorted? And her seed, which is later revealed to be the Messiah. This is the principle and the prophecy with which Yeshua was so familiar, that really was behind and drove the reason he was there. He will bruise your head and you will bruise his heel. Yeah, because he was going to come out of the grave in a new body, a glorified body. It was his body, it was his same body, but it was a glorified body, changed into a new kind of body. Satan, on the other hand, a bruise in your head, well, that's fatal. It says that Messiah is the seed. So this is the answer. This is why Messiah came, to be that promised seed. And in 1 Corinthians 15, it has some things to say about this principle. Now, Messiah has been raised from the dead. He became the first fruits of those who are asleep. See, it's the same speech, isn't it? Yeshua's talking about a grain of wheat going into the earth and dying. And then what happened? He came up out of the grave as a glorified being. He was the first fruit. That's the seed going into the ground, sprouting up. Since death came by man, resurrection of the dead also came by man. In the first case, death came through Adam. And then in the second case, resurrection from the dead comes through the Son of Man. In Adam, all die. That's what we're just seeing, right? Looking at the DNA and what happens with people. that came to us from our first father, Adam, because he ruined the perfection that he had and passed this mess on to us. So also in Messiah, all will be made alive. By all here, it means all who are going to be made alive. Not that all people will be made alive, because we have a choice. We have a choice. You see, we can continue on in that old life. And a lot of people will do that and choose to just be Satan's seed. And then others can see that there is a way. There is a way to be saved from that. Through Messiah, all will be made alive. But each in his own order. Messiah, the first fruits, he had to be first because he didn't have this problem. He didn't have this sin nature. He didn't have this marred image of God. He perfectly reflected his Father. It goes on to say that there in John 12, right? He's saying, I'm just telling you what my Father commanded me. In every way, he did what Adam didn't do, right? And so he had perfection to pass on to us and something more. And in Adam is only sin and death. In Messiah is the life of Messiah, culminating in the resurrection at his coming. 1 Corinthians 15 goes on to explain that. Here's some more from 1 Corinthians 15. The first man is of the earth, made of dust. The second man is Adonai from heaven. As is the one made of dust, such are those who are also made of dust. In other words, just earthly creatures, stripped of the perfect likeness of God. They're like animals. And as is the heavenly, such are they also that are heavenly. When we put our confidence and our trust and our belief in Yeshua Messiah, what happens? He enlivens our spirit so that we become spiritual persons. We still have the earthly nature too, don't we? Until the resurrection. As we have borne the image of those made of dust, let's also bear the image of the heavenly. That is why we do this every week, right? Because we're desirous of that. Because he has chosen us to be his children. So therefore, we're seeking him. Seeking to bear his image. And so his words are life to us. He is life to us. We're changed into a new creation. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Messiah, he is a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. So in your spirit, man, you're changed. In your body, you're not. And your body is essentially waiting for the coming of Messiah. If you are dead in the grave, you'll be raised with a new glorified body at that time, and it'll be you, but without sin. And if you're alive at the coming of Messiah, you'll be changed into that glorified body. And it's all through him, through his life. He is the seed, a new creation. You are a new creation. You're in process. You're in process. You're kind of like a caterpillar in that cocoon. You're in process. But everything is there for you to emerge as a beautiful butterfly. Therefore, if anyone is in Messiah, he is a new creation. We become a new creation when we put our faith in Messiah and are then born from above. That's when it happens. John 1, right at the beginning, is talking about these things. It says, as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become Elohim's children, to those who believe in his name. You see, this is something that comes from the Father. And this part of it is a gift. And this is why faith works. Faith is not part of a mechanism. It's not like part of your DNA. Faith is a spiritual thing. And if you put faith in Yeshua and you accept him and you accept his promise, then the Father has promised you in his word that he will give you the right to be his child. It's something he's doing. He does it directly for you. He doesn't have a category of people he's doing this for. He's doing it for you, specifically, very specifically, because he loves you. It's a gift because you believe in his Son. He honors that. He set this up. This is what pleases him to do. So that's why it works. It's that simple. But it's based on real principles. He didn't just say, well, let's just forget that whole sin thing and we'll just move on from here. Things had to be right. Things had to be corrected. And they were corrected the hard way, because that was the only way. But if you trace it all the way back to what it's all about him, his love, his desire to save us. That which is born of the flesh is flesh. That which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Generation. A new generation. Your spirit regenerated. That's a new person. Don't marvel that I said to you, you must be born anew. The wind blows where it wants to, and you hear its sound, but don't know where it comes from and where it's going. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. You're different. You are so different if you're born of the Spirit. People look at you and they say, hey, you're like the wind. I don't know what you're going to do next. They don't know because you don't know. Right? You go where his Spirit leads you because you're obedient to him. Instead of just listening to your old nature to dictate your life, you're listening to his Spirit to guide you. And he's given you the equipment to be able to do that by making you a new creature. So that can happen inside of you. He goes on after talking about the seed and what would happen to telling us what it means for us. He says, he who loves his life will lose it. He's talking about that fallen Adam life. The person that loves that, that's all they've got for a pathetically short amount of time, and then it's gone. He who hates his life in this world will keep it to eternal life. So in other words, we have to actually learn how to hate the life that we have in Adam. This is how we deal with that, because the old nature, you know what? The old nature loves the world. It loves all the stuff in the Adamic life. And in your spirit, man, you have to have this dialogue, and it's a choice you make. No, that's not the life for me, because I'm a new creature. I have an eternal hope. I'm going with the eternal life in Yeshua. That's what he's telling us we must do. We have to abandon the demands of our natural Adamic life to receive the new creation. Now, don't get me wrong here, because I'm not saying that you can never do anything pleasant, that you have to be miserable, that you have to beat yourself with some kind of a whip or something like that, like some people do. This is not what this is talking about. But what it's about is always putting what the Spirit is telling you ahead of what that old man is telling you to do. And this is a process. We grow in this as we go along. We learn how to do this better as we meet up with certain circumstances through our lives. And we have this thing called grace, because when the Father looks at us as his children, he sees we've put trust in Yeshua. He sees us in the righteousness of Yeshua, because that's the life of Yeshua, totally righteous. So he sees us as that person, and he extends grace to us so we can go through this growing process. It's not so we can keep living like the pagans. It's so that we have freedom to make mistakes as we're growing in knowing him. Because he knows we're going to. We are in a transition, are we not? In a transition, it's a process you're going through. So sometimes people get discouraged because they keep having problems with various aspects of their old nature. I'm here to tell you that's normal. That's part of a process. That doesn't make you like a bad person. It just means you're having this struggle with the Adamic nature within you. And we know what we need to do to deal with that. We have the tools. Make over our minds. Romans chapter 12. Make over your mind. Be transformed. So we do that by doing this. Focusing on his word, focusing on his ways, drawing close to him every day. And he helps us through it, day by day by day. That's how it works. He's not going to leave you as you keep progressing. He knows all your problems. He knows. Talk to him about it. Be real with him, because you might as well. He already knows it all, right? But you need to do it. You need to do it as part of your growth. The Father is looking for those who worship in spirit and truth to worship him. And that's not just scriptural truth, that's also truth about yourself. He is part of that process with you, because what's happening is he's recreating you. So, get into that together as a partnership with him. Take the opportunities that are before you, because you can hasten the process. If you drag your feet, it's going to become very unpleasant for you. If you choose those opportunities to move ahead, that's going to make the process much easier for you and better and more fulfilling. So I encourage that. Here's what Yeshua said, too, about this. If anyone serves me, let him follow me. Where I am, there will my servant also be. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. So this is what happens when you believe. Believing isn't just a confession that you make. That's the beginning. But believing is serving. Why wouldn't you? Believing is serving him. Believing is following him. And he says, where I am, there my servant also will be. You see, if we're following him, where he is, we're going to be, right? And the Father will honor that person, and does. You know, it does make a difference what you're doing in terms of your prayer life. If you are indeed serving and you are indeed following him, even though you might have some struggles in your life, but you are sincerely his servant and following him, the Father will honor you. And your prayer life will be much stronger. You'll see answers to those prayers in your life, and you'll see his blessing in your life. Trials too, we all have them, but he'll be with you through them. These are the people that actually are changed into a new creature. It's not just the confession, but it's moving forward in that transition process. So that, in a nutshell, is really what this is all about, this business of life in the seed. And that's how we can cooperate with it. And what Yeshua was really talking about. And it does require something of us every day because, you know, it really is really hard having these two natures, isn't it? I think all of us who want so much, like Paul said, you know, to follow the Torah, to be governed by the Torah, and then we find ourselves not sometimes, and it's not what we want. That can be very disappointing, cause us to be disappointed in ourselves. But we don't need to be, because our Father loves us. His Son gave his life to die for us. And it's more than just a concept. We actually have this new life within us. And we have this incredible hope for Messiah's soon return, when we will be changed to be like him. What a great thing to look forward to.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it.
You have been listening to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. That's the end of today's program. The scripture verses referenced in today's program are John chapter 12, verse 20 through verse 50, Genesis chapter 1, verse 11 through verse 12, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27 through verse 28, Genesis chapter 2, verse 16 through verse 17, Romans chapter 7, verse 14 through verse 17, Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, Galatians chapter 3, verse 16, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 20 through verse 23, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 47 through verse 49, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, John chapter 3, verse 6 through verse 9, and Romans chapter 12. Further teachings and study materials on the effects of sin on us and on the world, the effects of sin throughout history, the woman, Israel, the seed of the woman, Messiah, what it means to be made in the image of God, how the Torah helps us to fight against our sin nature, how to begin walking in the Holy Spirit, growing in your walk with Messiah, more about salvation, how Messiah fulfilled Bible prophecy and continues to fulfill Bible prophecy even now, and what end times prophecy tells us about our generation and how you can be prepared for the days ahead, along with many other teachings and topics, can all be found at our membership site, Zion Tabernacle. Sign up is free. Just go to zion.net. That's TSIYON.net. New programs on the Gospels will be airing every Sabbath right here on Zion Road Radio. Tune in next Shabbat to learn more Hebraic insights in the Gospels. Shabbat Shalom!
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths.
The Christian church system has claimed that Israel is cast off and done away with. However, Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 35 through verse 37 says, "Thus says Yahweh, who gives the sun for a light by day, and the ordinances of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. Yahweh of hosts is his name. If these ordinances depart from before me, says Yahweh, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. Thus says Yahweh, if heaven above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, then will I also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, says Yahweh." The sun is still here. The sea still roars. And the stars still shine. Learn how Yahweh's nation Israel is literally written in the stars as a permanent testimony of our God's commitment to his covenant with Israel. Visit our community site, Zion Tabernacle, and sign up as a free member to view Eliyahu ben David's seminar entitled One Nation Written in the Stars. Now available free of charge as part of Zion Fast Track, our introductory video course. Zion Fast Track will give you the big picture of what God is doing with his remnant nation in this very generation. To sign up and learn more about what other free resources you'll get as a Zion Tabernacle member, go to zion.org and click Join Us. That's TSIYON.org. Then click Join Us.
Trust in Yahweh.